Nutrient content of food. It's a topic we're going to be hearing more about. I'm absolutely convinced of it. And is it indeed agriculture's next challenge? That's what we're talking about in this episode of the Business of Agriculture. Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of the Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, your micronutrients as well. But what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't. But you can now figure that out with Pattern.ag's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field. Then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. I've got a great topic for you today, and I've got an awesome guest. His name is Kevin Folta. He's a professor of horticultural sciences at University of Florida. That's right, he's a Gator out of Gainesville. He's actually originally from northern Illinois, DeKalb, Illinois. Up there, you might know about that town. You might know about a little bit of history there. And then the other part is he's a host of a weekly podcast called Talking Biotech. And the more important part is he does some speaking on the road. So he and I know of each other. We knew of each other. And I said, you know what? I've got these topic lists that I come up with. I'm sitting on an airplane. I look out the window. I'm like, this is something I should address. And I read a lot. And I'm thinking, you know what? We've got 40+% of our country that's obese. We've got 2/3 of our country that has a weight problem. We've got this real issue that we've concentrated on productivity, massive amounts of quantity, and transportability and appearance and shelf stability, but we haven't necessarily talked about what food is really supposed to do for our bodies. It's supposed to nourish us, therefore nutrient content. And there have been a lot of studies, and some of them might be a little bit arguable, about that we've degraded or lost nutrient content of food. So I said, you know what, Kevin? I want you to come on and talk about the nutrient content of food and it being ag's next challenge. So before we get right into that, did I miss anything in your introduction? Oh, you're also a farmer. You and your wife have a specialty crop operation in rural Florida. What else?
I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah, between everything you mentioned, it keeps me busy. So thank you for having me aboard. It's nice to meet you in person. Well, kind of in person.
That's right, on a Zoom call. So remember, if you're listening to this, you can not only listen, you can watch. All Business of Agriculture episodes are released on Acres TV, the streaming platform created by the Hefty Boys out of South Dakota. Go to watchacrestv.org or .com, maybe it is. Either way, just type in Acres TV. And you can also check out my YouTube channel. It's the Damian Mason channel on YouTube, and it's all free to watch there. But also listen to it on whatever platform you get your podcast from. Is nutrient content of food ag's next challenge?
It is one aspect of ag's next challenge. I think it's the way in which we're going to be able to deliver those nutrients, and everything you spoke about in the beginning, from shipping to more durability in terms of ability to survive stress. All the aspects of agriculture are playing into shaping that final step of nutrient content. And also a lot of work in post-harvest biology. All these things together play into how much nutrient arrives at the plate.
I think it's wrong, and I live two lives: my farm life, my suburban life, and I travel a lot, as you do. And you talk to people, and they say crazy stuff. Maybe they watched one of Michael Pollan's inflammatory documentaries about how we're all agriculture is poisoning our customers and all this. I'm like, no, for God's sakes, that's not true. But there is an argument to be made, and it's not any way critical of agriculture. We did to make money. We made a tomato that could get picked in the Salinas Valley of California and be on a shelf in Cleveland in January and still look really good. The problem is, it doesn't have any taste. And you can also say that along with taste comes nutrients, and we're going to talk about that. We prioritize production, quantity, and shippability, et cetera, and we kind of lost some nutrient along the way. Maybe it's because the consumer wanted it. Iceberg lettuce was on every salad bar for the entire time I grew up. It's only in the last 20 years that we finally got a lettuce that actually, and your people down there in Florida grow the hell out of iceberg lettuce, I'm sure. But you know what? It's just a head of water. It doesn't have any nutrients in it. So where are we going?
Well, that's all. Those are great examples. And iceberg lettuce is a great example. Iceberg lettuce was something that would be grown in California and was called iceberg because it was shipped across the country to New York City in ice boxcars. And they used to celebrate that here come the icebergs because they actually got fresh lettuce in winter. So we could say, yeah, it's pretty much a dud in terms of its nutrient content because it's a lot of water. But, think back then, this was a big step forward because you had the ability to have fresh produce and fiber and all the good things that do come from it in the middle of winter. What you were talking about is right on. That,
by the way, that's an interesting, we sound critical. 100 years ago, if you're a poor immigrant and you're, you're just living in a tenement building in New York, and your wife comes home from the market with a head of iceberg lettuce, it beats the hell out of what might have been available then already. So it's not that it's bad comparatively now, but it wasn't then. That's probably a better way to look at it.
Well, Norman Borlaug, every year for Christmas, he would get an orange. I mean, when you think about this, the scarcity, my wife grew up in Ukraine, and for them, a real treat was to get a banana, once a year.
Yeah.
The idea of things changing is really an important context that I'm glad you brought up. In terms of the idea that things are getting that worse in terms of that tomato in Cleveland, the breeders who developed the next generation of plants did exactly what industry wanted them to do. Give me something that I can pick in Salinas or I can pick in Immokalee, Florida. I can pick it green, put it on a truck, send them to someplace else, gas them, get them off to the market. They checked the boxes. They wanted big red things to put in the basket, which meant you needed to have disease resistance was really important trait.
Right.
And size, right? Fruit size. They had to be standard size. The tomatoes had to be able to make 7 slices for Burger King and Wendy's. This is exactly what industry ordered, and breeders made it. And flavors and aromas and nutrients were not necessarily a priority. And so that was
and I want to just go back to what you just said right there. It's not that we did anything wrong. We did respond to the customer. If McDonald's sells more tomatoes than, probably the 4th biggest grocery chain, if you had to guess, right? If a tomato slice goes on every cheeseburger at McDonald's, they probably sell more tomatoes than Piggly Wiggly or something like that. I'm just thinking of a smaller to regional size chain. If they say we want to be able to get 7 slices out of this, then you respond and you create. We didn't do anything certainly wrong. We prioritized what the customer wanted. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's right. The word is prioritized. That breeders and plant genetic improvement followed what the demand was and did a great job with it. The problem is that now we sit here and look at where we are versus where we were, and you go get an heirloom tomato or you grow one in the backyard, and it's night and day compared to that pink funny thing that they put on your sandwich at Subway. And that's just a product of scale and efficiency and breeding for different priorities. The good news is that we've recognized that, and there are a significant number of efforts nationwide that are trying to reverse that. And how do we reclaim the flavors, aromas, and nutrition?
There's always the thing, and you and I both have read Mark Schatzker's books. You and I both met Mark Schatzker personally. And if you're listening or watching this and you're saying, who's he talking about? I think the book that kind of put him on the map was a book called Steak. He's a foodie, not a food activist. He's not a vegan. He's none of those things. So he wrote a book called Steak, and it was about pursuing the best steak in the world. And he went to Argentina, and he went to the Amarillo, Texas, and all over these kind of places. And then he wrote a book called The Dorito Effect, and that was all about flavoring versus flavor. And so there's a lot of stuff we'll get into about the Schatzker thing, but you just said something that now looking at nutritive content, looking at nutrient value, nutrient density, all those kinds of things that you and I both, I think, believe is coming to food. But then there's the thing, I read Schatzker's book and I said, you're more of a foodie. I'm wondering still if the consumer cares, or if more than a subset of the consumer cares. We know that the foodie crowd, the wine and cheese eaters, the kind that go on culinary discovery trips throughout Vermont for cheddar and wine, they can be concerned about this. Can the Walmart grocery shopper that is on a household income of $60,000 care about this? Can they afford to care about this?
Well, this is the convergence that I think we seek to happen, because as somebody who's in a state university or land-grant university where our growers are supplying significant amount of the wintertime strawberries, fruits and vegetables, strawberries and other fruits and vegetables, strawberries, tomatoes, lettuce, sweet corn, all this stuff comes out of Florida during the winter. And we know that the consumer is demanding a better product across the board, that consumers are consistently disappointed by flavors and aromas, but that's something that we are aspiring to fix. And we can talk about that as we go
the
on.
Research ferreted out, Kevin, that the consumer, is there polling, legit research, not anecdotal. Obviously, You're a professor, so you're all about empirical versus anecdotal. Is there research that says the consumer truly wants better natural flavored? Is there some study on that?
I can't cite it, but this is work that we did maybe a decade ago, where we spent a lot of time analyzing. We did what was called consumer-assisted selection, that rather than saying, what does the commercial industry want, and then breeding plants to hit that target, said, what does the consumer want?
Right.
That if we sat down with consumers and said, taste this strawberry and this strawberry and this strawberry, or this tomato, this tomato, this tomato, you could start to frame what it was that they liked in terms of the acid or the sugar acid balance, or the grapiness or the sweetness, like all the different aspects of flavor and aroma. And then we're able to predict and this is work that was done in conjunction with Dr. Howard Moskowitz, who was the guy who came up with Tropicana Country Time orange juice and Prego spaghetti sauce. Using his formulas, you could create and frame a fruit that everybody would like, yet has never been created. And that defined a new target for breeders to begin to identify the different genes that controlled the flavor notes that went into improving that fruit or vegetable.
I want to get into also what the consumer wants versus what industry wants. I'm going to use McDonald's as an example. But before I do that, dear listener, I want to talk to you about Truterra. If you are in the business of agriculture and you're a landowner, more importantly, if you're a farmer, Truterra might help you diversify your revenue stream. We're talking about ag economy stubbing its toe, right? 21, 22, and 23 were record farm income years. 24 is not going to be. So what about the ability to make more money off an acre that you currently operate? What if you could do that through a sustainability program? Well, Truterra can help. Truterra has helped a lot of farmers get more money out of those acres, maybe by putting in cover crops, by reducing your tillage, some different environmental things you can do that's good for the asset. It's also good for your bottom line. Go to TruterraAg.com. That's Truterra, Truterra, TruterraAg.com to learn more about diversifying your revenue with a sustainability program. When I said that, does the consumer care? And you talked about, well, I can't cite a statistic right now. I've pointed out a number of times because, the ag community, Kevin, generally thinks cheap, cheap, cheap. I want to make it cheap. And I've been harping on this my whole career. They think that everybody thinks like them. Let's face it. Farm people are generally cheap people. And I'm not being mean. They are. So they think everybody just prioritizes commodity and all that. And when I say, here's where you're off. When you even say the Walmart customer, remember, Walmart has organic food now. They didn't when they started. Walmart has a higher value branded product line, just like they have Great Value, their own in-house brand. So to pretend that every consumer only wants the cheap, Walmart wouldn't have the premium brands and the organic and the other things if every customer that walked in the door only wanted Great Value brand, cheapest commodity type food ever. So I am with you. I think it's going to be a challenge right now, and we'll get to that about food inflation, but the last 4 years have made it harder on consumers, certainly in the bottom half socioeconomically, but I think there's still demand for a better product.
No, I agree. I think there is a demand for it. And I think that it's just been misguided or misprioritized, I should say, in terms of what we would deliver in terms of crop genetic improvement to the consumer. And I think that that's really starting to take a turn, which is really exciting.
Here's the thing. When I talk about nutrient content, you and I hear it. We go to seminars and we hear people talk about nutrient density, nutritive content, those kinds of things, nutritive value. It's hard to measure. Whether I'm walking through the aisles of Wal-Mart or I'm at Whole Foods will try and tell you eat organics is better for you, which is a bullshit marketing claim. There's no evidence of that. But organic is a growing practice. It's not a nutrient measuring device. How does the consumer know? I mean, you and I are ag people, and if I came to your farm, I'd be excited about it. I'm buying direct from the farmer. You and your wife are there and, pet your cat and whatever. I'd feel that it's great. But I don't know that your produce is anything better than I could buy at Kroger by looking at it.
Well, but this is some of the nuances to this entire discussion. And let's pick this apart a little bit. When we talk about nutrient density, density is a relationship between mass and volume, right? So how much stuff is there per unit size? And when we talk about modern fruits and vegetables, we're talking about things that were selected to be larger. Consumer wanted big strawberries. Yeah. The little tiny ones that are really tasty that grow on the forest floor, they have the same amount of nutrients and flavor and aroma compounds as the big one. Yep. The big one just dilutes them out in water. Yep. So when we're talking about nutrient density, okay, maybe we can say that's gone down over time. But if we're talking about the amount of nutrients per fruit, then that's about the same. So it really does vary. If you say per gram, yeah, it has gone down. But per unit produce, it's the same.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes, the density, because if you make a fruit larger, now you're talking about produce, and obviously you're a Florida guy. What about steak? If the frame size of a steer coming off of the feed yards in Kansas is, my God, 40% bigger than it was just 30 years ago, right? We're taking these steers up to 1,600 pounds. That steak is big, considerably bigger than it was 4 decades ago. On that regard, it actually does have the same amount of nutrient density because it's still the amount of iron or whatever the other thing, riboflavin, name the thing, zinc per ounce in that regard. Yes, it's still retained to the density because it's on a per pound basis. Yeah,
that's correct. Genetics just made an animal with better feed conversion that got larger. And so the amount per gram is probably about the same, plus or minus. It might have improved in some cases and decreased in others, but probably about the same.
I said per ounce and you went to grams. Why is it you professors always have to confuse things? We're mostly listened to in the United States and Canada, where by God, we still talk about, okay, maybe not Canada.
No, I agree. The funny part is I switch from one to the other, kind of automatically. It kind of works that way. I think that most of the scientific literature is in grams, and so that's why I kind of follow that direction.
But okay, so let's talk about the density thing. It becomes a discussion. But back to my prior question, the consumer generally buys with their eyes. And that's why we made carrots that are, pretty. And now I'm noticing that there was a thing about ugly fruit. I wrote about it because it was a topic maybe a decade ago that, this fruit would get wasted, which wasn't necessarily true because it could go to animal feed and there's all kinds of things that ugly, meaning it didn't pass the test of being a pretty piece of produce. The consumer still does buy with his or her eyes. And you can't tell nutrients by your eyes. So how will we, if this thing is to be, how will it come to fruition other than somebody saying we should do it? How will the consumer even choose it?
No, I understand that question, but here's the important point to remember is that nutrients in a fruit or vegetable don't matter until they are consumed and absorbed. So until you actually get it into the person and it's bioavailable, what difference does it make, right? And so we have to think about fruits and vegetables as vehicles for that nutrient content that have to be attractive and have to taste good. And it kind of ties in with a funny story. I have a friend who's a strawberry breeder in Italy, And he said, I've spent the last 12 years and I've bred a strawberry that has 25% more anthocyanins. And so people will get 25% more anthocyanin from their strawberry. And I said, well, we made a strawberry through traditional breeding that tastes better. And people will eat 3 of mine for every 1 of yours. And so they get 300% of the exposure to that nutrient. And the farmer sells 3 times as much. So the discussion of how much nutrient is there really is only relevant if it's accessible, if a consumer can afford it, if it lasts long enough for someone to eat it, and if someone is willing to eat it. Otherwise, we'd just be eating, kale and collards, right? And it has to be something people want.
Schatzker, the author, we've aforementioned author, talks about in The Dorito Effect the tie between flavor and nutrients.
Yeah.
And that's where his overriding assertion in The Dorito Effect is we took something and flavored the hell out of it artificially, and it fools the brain, it fools the taste buds, and then we maybe overconsume it, but we're not getting, the word empty calorie is oftentimes tossed around, and I kind of call bullshit on that. I'm like, what's that mean? It's still a calorie. If you were tell an Ethiopian that is starving that they're eating empty calories, they're going to say, I got to eat, right? So I don't like to use that word, but I do think on the Schatzker front, Kevin, that when he says heavily amount of flavored, artificially flavored stuff, fools us into thinking we're getting something that flavor would have normally been tied to. The connotation is I've got a bunch of fruity berry drink and I'm obese, but because my mind actually thinks I'm getting the actual berry, which would be doing something for me. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think that's been borne out by the research that human evolution craved things like sweet, fatty, salty, that these were nutrients, or they were sensory experiences that when we found them, you found some berries.
Nutrients came with the flavor.
Nutrients came with flavor and aroma.
Or
and
feel.
So
In your fat, if my mouth, I used to talk about in Food Science 161, the only food science class I ever took, about mouthfeel. So feel and flavor historically meant that there was a nutrient tied to that flavor or feel.
That's right. And so when you found those things as a hunter and gatherer, you would consume lots of them because you didn't know when the next ones were coming.
Right.
And that became part of the ingrained in human evolution and in the human brain and human behavior, that when we found it and experienced it, we gorged on it. And I think that's been a hypothesis that's played out to some degree, that people who, once you find sweetness, you continue to want that sweetness, consume it till it's gone. I've done this experiment personally with a bag of Doritos many times. Mm-hmm. And I think there's some realistic, something real there. And it's also been shown in rodent studies extensively that the ones who are craving the colors and aromas are also getting better nutrition from that.
What about, and then sticking with this theme, Schatzker also talked at great length about chickens and how they've lost their flavor. We prioritize, and we have. I mean, and I've worked for the poultry companies, and we make an amazing chicken. It gets from a fledgling fresh out of the egg, just hatched, to on your dinner plate in a month and a half. Yeah. I just want to, if you're listening to this and this is new to you, it goes from it just hatches out of the egg until it's going through a processing plant to be delivered to your plate in a month and a half. That is nothing short of a damn miracle of modern production. We sacrifice some flavor. Did we also sacrifice the nutrients?
Probably to some degree, yes, but probably more micronutrients and smaller things that matter. Protein probably about the same.
The protein, yes, but some of the micronutrients, which are critically important to human health, right?
Sure, but they're not getting a diverse diet. The standard raised chicken or turkey is experiencing whatever they get from the feed that's provided. There's not a lot of diet range in the diet. You're not getting a lot of the micros that things that are foraging get. And we raise red rangers and broad-breasted turkeys. We get the fast growers. I think it's 52 days on the red rangers.
Meaning you and your wife?
Yeah. Well, mostly my wife. But we process on farm. We do chickens and turkeys, and we raise mostly the heritage breed just because of the flavors and aromas are different. The experience is different for the consumer, and they like that, and we sell to that. We also raise some of the fast ones but still, compared to a grocery store chicken, you can't compare. But for us
Yours
to
has
raise,
more flavor.
oh, much more flavor. It's off the charts.
And you said protein would probably be equal. Do you think that because of a more broad-based diet and a little slower growth, those micros, the zincs or whatever we might be talking about, magnesium, whatever the hell they are, more concentration?
Yeah, probably, but that's anecdotal guess. I mean, I haven't done the math on that. But what it does do is it provides a better product that's more likely to be consumed and more likely more of it when it's consumed. Mm-hmm. The thing is, chicken's pretty good. I mean, just any grocery store chicken is fine. And but you see the point where when you have heritage breed stuff like we do these specialty chickens and turkeys, the consumer really does find they have a hard time going back to grocery store chickens when they've had one that comes from the farm.
And then we talk about those, obesity is much more prevalent in lower income. And there's, the more, I'm being restraint talk here because that's what you tune in for, dear listeners. The more touchy-feely type is going to say, because they're just so poor, they don't know where their next meal is coming from. They have no income security. And I'm like, I kind of call bullshit on that. I'm like, well, if you get an EBT card and you get SNAP benefits, you're in probably a better situation to know that you have stability on the ability to get than someone that's, a little better off, but still has a variable income. So I kind of call BS on that. But is it because they're consuming? Is it because they lack discipline? Is it because they shop at, there's the thing about they live in food deserts. What is the reason that they choose less nutritious, less nutrient-oriented foods and consume them in massive quantities? That there's a bunch of things. It could be about lifestyle, all that stuff. But is there an easy answer on just getting the food right?
No, that's a really tough one because folks who are socioeconomically challenged are hardly monolithic. And I think out here in rural Florida, you find a large Hispanic population who probably malnutrition is more prevalent than overnutrition because of issues like food deserts. People don't drive, or the best thing you can get is an onion and a banana at the Circle K. But still have very good eating habits that come from the way they've always eaten. So culturally, yeah. The big problem in the cities is the availability of junk and empty calories, I've said before, of sweet, salty, and fat. And the availability of this and the price point in that is less expensive than fruits or vegetables or meat, especially. Being able to afford a carton of breaded popcorn chicken at the grocery store at the Circle K is a lot cheaper than going and buying a chicken and not processing, but preparing an entire chicken from a chicken you buy at the grocery store. It's a lot more work too. And when you're trying to make ends meet, it's smart to do it that way, but sometimes isn't always possible.
I want to dig into why I'm optimistic that this is indeed Ag's next challenge, I think, but also why I think it's not insurmountable or even that big of a problem, because I think we're already on the right path. Before I do that, let's talk about Redox. Redox Bionutrients, the company that came on board with me January 1st. I've been to their headquarters in February. I was in Burley, Idaho to speak to a large agricultural audience. And I went to their headquarters. They've got greenhouses. They've got research plots. Darren Moon began this company 30 years ago. It's a bionutrients company. It's not a biological. It's not a bunch of tech money that poured in the last 2 years and said, here we're one of the 1,200 random biological companies. No, they're a bionutrients company. He started out in specialty crop, moved into turf, and now moving increasingly into broad acre. Places like where I'm from in Indiana, you really ought to check out their product line. Their Redox Bionutrients as a product line that can provide superior nutrition, stress defense, root growth, and soil health, while also giving you efficient nutrient uptake. We're talking about nutrients right here. You know what? Your plants need nutrients also. If it's in the soil and it doesn't get in the plant, it has done you no good. Go to redoxgrows.com, Redox, R-E-D-O-X, redoxgrows.com, and check out their product line. McDonald's, I don't eat there much. Sometimes I'm running through an airport. I have no choice. But McDonald's prioritized quality and went to the quarter pounder, not ever frozen beef, because they thought it created a better tasting product. McDonald's changed their cheeseburgers. McDonald's started prioritizing and then talked about the produce that's going in there. If McDonald's thinks that the consumer will buy a better product, and you say, well, they were pushed along because of Five Guys. They were pushed along because of this Smash Burger and this Shake Shack and these other new chains that have well, why were they pushed along? Because those places promised a better tasting. And you might argue, you say, well, it's not better for you, it's still a cheeseburger. Well, I don't know, cheeseburgers are good for you. If McDonald's is doing this, it tells me the consumer really is on board with a better tasting and better eating experience, which could then, Kevin, tie right back to it's also got better nutrition. In other words, it's not just adding sugar to it. It's not just flavoring the hell out of it with artificial flavors. Am I right that this actually is a trend that we should be positive about?
Yeah, I think that's a good trend. I think the idea that we're seeing more and more fresh food options with better produce and improved meats, this kind of thing, I think we are seeing improvements there. The Filet-O-Fish was, things like McRib and Filet-O-Fish kind of fall out of place. The kind of mystery meat angles are not as popular. I think the trends are very positive that eating things that are closer to their origin matters. And I think that's maybe one point that I don't want to let escape, if I can just jump in with something, is we left out the idea of post-harvest biology here, and that the newer fruits and vegetables are retaining nutrients longer because of the way things are handled after harvest. And that's a big one.
Say that again. The newer fruits and vegetables are?
That we're learning not only to have more nutrient quality and better sensory qualities, but they're actually being retained longer because of improved post-harvest practices. And it used to be that something like folate in a strawberry, and this is old research now, folate, really critical for neural tube development, all the good things like this, B vitamin, that it falls off precipitously as soon as you pick that berry. But when you immediately cool it and suck out all the field heat, you store it properly, and you ship it properly, you can retain much more. So this is another big aspect of that idea of how you get nutrients into a person from fruits and vegetables, is making sure we don't lose them after harvest.
Yeah, so it's not even that, okay, the product went to Cleveland, or a former example from Florida, and it's not that the person just, went and bought the cheapest thing. They're doing everything right. They're like, I want to take this berry, apple, name of the product, and but hell, I got it. I did everything right. I went and bought this for me and my family. But by the time I got it, it had lost. It was just interesting. It's not rotting, but it is slowly. It is actually pretty rapidly. I say slowly. It's rapidly declining just from leaving the field. And now you're saying we didn't have to change the product. We had to change the process.
That's right. And that's a big part of it, right? You in order to get this thing, again, it's not just how much is in the fruit or vegetable, it's how you get it into a person. Yeah. And that means it has to be affordable, it has to be accessible, it has to be have some post-harvest quality that's been retained. All those other factors are so important and are things that are being addressed.
All right, talk about McDonald's and why I'm hopeful that we see this. Where else, when we talk about nutrient content of food, and we said if the consumer or the company like the McDonald's, the world, Kroger, whatever it should be, wants it. And then the eating customer, it looks like you and I both think is opting for it. The grocery trade, I'm not sure they want what's easy for them to turn a margin on. Do they have a role in this? Do they care? Or they'll just sell whatever that gets either made or I'm trying to figure out if they have a role in this.
Well, their role is very thin margins on produce and probably lose money on it in most retail grocery establishments. But the idea of having that prolonged shelf life and better quality through longer shelf life is probably the best way to fix that. And coming up with products that don't have to be shipped as far or maybe survive longer during shipping, that arrive and are, we're learning about in the environments that you place produce in. We've done a lot of work in my lab. How do different colors of lighting change the flavors and aromas and the deterioration of fruit products?
And with changing lighting or changing in a production process, and those are, did the nutrients change, or just
actually,
it did?
Oh yeah, there's studies that show that if you have a blue light in your broccoli compartment in your refrigerator, they retain more chlorophyll and the other associated compounds. So there's a number of compounds that are positively affected by illumination, even at home in your refrigerator. So there's a lot of ways that this can be manipulated, and future studies will look at this. But it all starts by having a fruit that's improved with better aromas and flavors and higher nutrient quantity.
Got me thinking, Mrs. Mason, my favorite vegetable is cauliflower with blue cheese dip when I have like a cold plate. And she always wants to toss it when it starts to get brown. I say, hell, I grew up eating, we didn't throw anything away, all right? And now you got me thinking, by the time I'm eating that cauliflower that's starting to get a little rusty, maybe I should. Maybe it's actually lost its nutritional component. What do you think?
Well, but if it lost 25% of its nutrient content, it just means you have to eat twice as much, right? I mean, we get this all the time because at the farmers market where we sell, anything that we don't sell, we have to take home and eat. And it's always the ugly stuff, and it's the stuff that maybe doesn't, look perfect. So we have to get creative, but we eat plenty of we eat a lot of good stuff every week. And I think that's, for me anyway, that's what I think we get ideal nutrition because it's picked on Friday and consumed on Saturday.
A couple more topics on this front, Professor Folta. On the grocery thing, they talk about center store, heavily processed stuff. I want to make sure that, I don't want to be one of those guys. Everything I know, I learned from my country club. So just because I eat a little bit differently than I did maybe growing up when I was, in my farm background, or when I was poor, when I was in my 20s, it seems to me that heavily processed foods, they got to bump back up in consumption during the COVID time because people went to the store and bought as much stuff as they could to fill the pantry and also ease, of consumption. But it seems to me heavily processed stuff is being punished. That's why you're seeing the Crafts and the Mondeleses are merging because they're struggling with margins, et cetera. Is that a response to this, or is there something else at play?
Yeah, I think there has been a lot of vilification of the ultra-processed food, which that's the term that kind of
comes in a box, right? Something that comes in a box or there's something that looks like that's got that's what we're talking about, crackers and cookies and all that kind of stuff, chips and whatever, right?
Yeah, but processing is not a dirty word to me. Like processing is drying out something. It's canning. It's all those things are processing. Right. So when they talk about ultra processed, it's just kind of a shorthand for coming from a Kraft or a Mondelez or whatever that are generating these products. I think they're perfectly fine. Everything has its own nutrient content. A lot of these things are fortified for specific vitamins by law. So maybe they're not so bad after all. I don't vilify these things. I don't consume much of them. Yeah, I'm sticking on the edge of the grocery store when I go and the beer aisle. But other than that, I don't necessarily wander into the middle too much, except for things like crackers and pasta, things like that.
Then the other question is, do you think that we're not that healthy? It's been almost a decade. We're 1/5 of our U.S. domestic GDP economy is healthcare.
Yeah.
Now you can argue we've gotten better at healthcare. I need to get a hip replacement, and it's about like going and getting your teeth cleaned at this point. So healthcare has improved, but healthcare has also become an outsized. Like when I was born and you were born in the 60s, it was like 4% of our GDP, and it's 5 times itself since then. Yeah. So something's wrong. It's not just because we got better at hip replacements, because we need hip replacements because we're not healthy, whatever. Is this all tied together?
I think
or are we eating okay and it's just we're eating too much? What the hell's going on with the hell? Make the connection.
No, I think we're actually past an inflection point. I think there's a lot of things that are happening. So let's cover a couple of them. I think that the awareness of diet and the interest in changing towards more healthful fruits and vegetables, where the priorities are flavors and aromas, will bring more people into eating fresh fruit and vegetables. The idea that newer varieties and newer cultivars are higher yielding and last longer means they're less expensive and more accessible, can be shipped further, and people will have more ability to get them, which makes a good step. But probably one of the big things that's kind of a dark horse in most conversations are these GLP-1 inhibitor drugs that are out there. These ones that cause change not only in body composition and fat composition. These things like semaglutide drugs you may have seen on TV.
Lilly
Wegovy and
there's a couple. Ozempic is one of them.
Ozempic,
what you're talking about is it decreases appetite.
It changes cravings for food. And I think the Coca-Colas and the McDonald's and all of them see the writing on the wall on this. It could drastically change, unless these things have some other side effect that we're not anticipating that emerges, which doesn't look like it'll happen. This could radically change the way people eat and the preferences people have.
It's funny, I didn't even tease you on this, but when I told you I come up with topics and think who would be a good guest on this topic, I have as a future topic to record on, will obesity drugs decrease the food demand by 1/3? Because I really believe that is possible. By the way, you're talking about Coca-Cola. Well, I'm sitting here drinking a Coca-Cola Classic. It's good. None of that diet crap.
No, nothing wrong with that. But I think that these does stand to change a lot. And think about even things like transportation, where flights have had to accommodate larger passengers and more gas on board. I mean, a lot of things may change because of the advent of these drugs.
Yeah. So what about on the food front? So that's a drug, that's a pharmaceutical answer. It's not a food answer. So get me out of here. Nutrient content. First off, is the nutrient content of food going to help our health, or is it going to be the drugs?
I think better food, better quality food that lasts longer and is more accessible and affordable is what we're going to find. And while trends are going up in terms of many aspects of costs, I think that we're producing more with less. We're trying to do better with that. Even though there's fewer farmers, we're able to still have very productive production of things like fruits and vegetables. So I think the future is
talking about fruits and vegetables because you're a specialty crop producer. But remember that I love the graphic that I saw on social media that showed a vastly overweight, unhealthy person, and it said, "Don't blame meat for what sugar created," because I'm a meat eater and I'm more than my 220 pounds, which is what the American average is of that, and I'm not overweight. So I know you're a fruits and vegetable guy, but there's nothing wrong with beef, poultry, and pork, and a little bit of fish thrown in there also.
Well, but your beef, poultry, and pork are consumers of vegetable material, right? So we're creating corn and soy and other stuff to be able to feed those animals, and that's a good thing. So it all starts with plants, even our meat consumption.
We recorded an episode with my friend Todd Thurman about a bunch of things, but he talked about as America gets older, the protein demands. Actually, you've got more protein demands as you get older to retain and maintain muscle and bone density, and how meat plays into that. And the vegan and the climate crusader crowd are not going to like it that we get older. We actually need to step up the meat consumption as a percentage of our diet. What do you think about that?
No, that's true. And or at least the protein consumption, right? So there's how do you do that in efficient ways? And meat production is horribly efficient, especially when you look at poultry. Very, very amazing feed conversion into a pound of animal flesh from a pound of vegetable product. Yeah. So I think you're going to see increased. I think we're in a time of diminishing returns in terms of how fast you can make a chicken, but it's still a pretty awesome process.
Nutrient content of food, agriculture's next challenge. That's what we talked about here today. His name is Kevin Folta. Last word.
Well, I think people should just get excited about eating more fresh products, fruit, vegetables, meats, whatever. That the real trick here is just to consume more of the good stuff. And we know that there are many health effects in long-term degenerative disease that can be directly connected to a lack of fresh fruits and vegetables. And as you mentioned, as we get older, we need more protein, and milk and meat are a great way to get that. So eat more of the good stuff and buy it closest to the field. Buy it locally if you can. And if you can't, be grateful for the fact that you can get it from somewhere else.
If you're anywhere near Gainesville, you're going to look him up and buy stuff from his direct-to-consumer business. What's the farm called? Folta Farms?
No, it's Exotics, EGGSOTICS. We've got a great Facebook page. It's my wife's business. She does that full time. I'm sitting in air conditioning while she's out in 90 degrees.
All right, so if they want to check out the Facebook page, they go to eggs, like the fried and scrambled, Exotics?
Yep. Exotics, like eggs, because she started out in Illinois, actually, doing mostly eggs, and so that name kind of stuck. But we do everything under the sun these days.
I'm going to go and check that out. You also, if you're interested, check out his Talking Biotech podcast that releases every Saturday. His name's Kevin Folta. He's a professor of horticultural sciences at the University of Florida in Gainesville. So much thanks for being here. This has been a lot of fun. Maybe we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you very much, Damian.
Got it. Thanks for being here. Till next time, share this with somebody that can listen to it. Please go to my YouTube channel and hit subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. You can also watch this show live on Acres TV. Till next time, thanks for being here. I'm Damian Mason, and this is, as ever, the Business of Agriculture. Well, that concludes another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. This episode was brought to you by Pattern.ag. You know, everybody in agriculture understands the importance of soil health. We also keep an eye on our soil better than we ever did through advanced soil testing. But what if there was a company that provided predictive analytics, not just checking out nutrients and all the elements that are in there, but also could tell you the degree of risk you face with disease and pest pressure? That's right, Pattern.ag can do that. They actually can tell you, hey, you're going to have a real issue here. You can proactively treat for corn rootworm or cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome before the problem actually starts costing you yield. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to find the nearest rep that can help you start doing better for your soil.